Greetings!
I'm Propane Salesman, and this is my Evil Dead iceberg. In case you don't know, an iceberg chart is a format used to lay out information on a topic, with the most widely known information at the top, and the information becoming increasingly more obscure the farther you go down. I've created this iceberg on the Evil Dead franchise, which I'm assuming you're familiar with if you clicked on this video. However, if you aren't familiar with Evil Dead, it's a franchise that follows the main character Ash Williams, played by Bruce Campbell, and his frequent battles against evil spirits from beyond this realm. Without further ado, gas up your chainsaws, reload your boomsticks, and let's get this thing going. Groovy is the single most iconic line in the franchise. Its most notable uses are in Evil Dead 2, when Ash installs his chainsaw to his hand, in Army of Darkness, when he installs his new medieval prosthetic hand,
Groovy.
and at the end of Ash vs. Evil Dead's pilot episode.
Good to be back.
How does it feel?
Groovy.
A consistent, cohesive continuity has never been Evil Dead's strong suit. There's the obvious things, like all of Ash's friends except Linda disappearing, Ash being taken prisoner instead of worshipped in Army of Darkness, but there's also smaller things, like the make and model of the shotgun completely changing from 1 to 2, Ash's gray hair streak vanishing. Even in Ash vs. Evil Dead, the cabin should still be destroyed from Evil Dead 2, but when he revisits it, it doesn't look all that bad. So if you watch these movies back to back, or edit them together so one picks up where the last left off, you just kinda have to ignore all this stuff and just watch the movie. A newly released 4 vs. 1 multiplayer game where there's a team of 4 survivors, comprised of various characters from throughout the series, including 4 separate versions of Ash from the 3 movies in the TV show, who all have to work together to complete various objectives while another player controls a Kandarian demon and works to slow them down, sabotage them, and kill them. It's a really fun game and I highly recommend it.
Listen up. See this? This is my boomstick!
The second most iconic line in the franchise. So iconic that it's even retroactively made people refer to the shotgun in Evil Dead 1 as a boomstick. It also had a huge impact on gaming, but that's its own story. The 1973 Oldsmobile Delta 88, also known as the Classic, is Ash's primary choice of transportation in the series, appearing in not just each Evil Dead film, but almost every Sam Raimi picture to date. Even the only Sam Raimi picture that doesn't have it, The Quick and the Dead, a Wild West movie, still has rumors that it appeared in the movie somewhere with a stagecoach or something built around it. And according to Bruce Campbell, the reason this car shows up in every movie is because it's the car Sam Raimi lost his virginity in. I'm gonna choose to believe he's joking. Evil Dead Rise is the next upcoming Evil Dead movie, directed by Lee Cronin. It's slated to come out in theaters next year, but it was originally supposed to come out on HBO Max sometime this year. It seems like it'll be a lot more like Evil Dead 2013 than like the original trilogy, as Ash won't be in it. In 1978, Sam Raimi and his buddies were a little more than a bunch of college kids who wanted to make movies. They decided they should make a horror movie, as you could make those on a smaller budget and still find distribution. They started their quest to create Evil Dead by filming within the woods to be used as their proof of concept. Legal advice and help was provided by Phil Gillis, who was Robert Tappert's family lawyer. And they got an intent to distribute deal with New Line Cinema back before they hit it big. They had to ask all sorts of people to invest in the project, from their own friends and family members to local business owners and even random people they met. The first investor was just a guy that Sam Raimi met by chance at a Super 8 development store in a mall. He just happened to be a business owner with enough money and interest in the project to invest in it. Their initial estimate for how much money they would need was less than $100,000, which then increased to $150,000, and by the time filming had wrapped, the production had cost $375,000, which is still pretty low by 1980 standards. The movie went on to kill it in drive-in and international markets, and made even more on home video sales in just the early years after release, so the expense paid off very well in the end. To this day, the original investors and their estates are still being paid for their stake in The Evil Dead. Before he had his own game, Ash appeared as a guest character in the asymmetrical horror game Dead by Daylight in 2019 as part of the Ash vs. Evil Dead chapter. This was the best way to play as Ash in a video game on a modern console before his own game came out. He's the only survivor in this game to have actual dialogue, in the form of having a selection of quips in the lobby menu from before you start the game.
That's right. That's me, baby. Look who's shitting in the tall grass. What is this, a staring contest? Come on, let's go.
Know when cocktail hour is? Anytime. Because with Shemp's beer, it's never too early. Shemp's, it's for drinkers, not thinkers.
Evil Dead 1's filming was originally planned as a 6-week shoot. However, after those allotted 6 weeks had passed, most of the cast and crew had to leave due to having other obligations. With a crew of around 6 people and none of the main cast left except for Bruce Campbell, the team had to pull together and improvise if they wanted to finish their movie. They hired whatever friends, family members, and locals they could for shots where the characters' faces were either not in frame or covered in Deadite makeup. In the credits, these actors were named False Shemps. The name False Shemp is a reference to the Three Stooges, which was a major source of inspiration for Sam Raimi. Samuel Horwitz played the character Shemp Howard in The Three Stooges until his death in 1955, but his brothers Moses and Jerome Horwitz, aka Moe and Curly, were still under contract to produce 4 more Three Stooges shorts before it expired. As a bandage solution, they used older archive footage of Shemp whenever they could, and when they needed a new shot with him, actor Joe Palma was used as a stand-in with his face obscured. Fans referred to Palma's Shemp as Fake Shemp, which was Sam Raimi's inspiration to coin the term for using stand-ins for unavailable actors. Sam Raimi has a reputation of being somewhat of a bully on the sets of his movies. He notably likes to torture Bruce Campbell whenever he can.
Sam doesn't hit me or verbally abuse me quite as much as he did before because there's too many people standing around now. If your crew is only 6 people, you can do whatever you want to the lead actor. And no one's going to tell.
Every time in any of his movies that the main character is getting something thrown at them or hit with something off screen, it's probably Sam Raimi doing the deed.
Any opportunity to torture Bruce, Sam would take within a second.
Okay, now attack Bruce wildly. And beat him once. And go for it again. Higher. Hold it, Dave. Leave it there for a while.
Sam would always call him, you big baby, and, and yeah, you can't take it. Oh, you're too hot, huh?
Bruce is in.
As previously discussed in the False Shemp entry, Evil Dead is full of homages to the Three Stooges. The most notable examples include the bleeding light bulb from The Evil Dead being directly taken from the Three Stooges skit A Plumbing We Will Go.
Here we go! Straighten her up now so I can line her up.
The filming conditions for each movie were pretty bad, and it was famously miserable for Evil Dead 1. At day, the filming location was hot as hell, and at night it was cold as balls. Lots of people received injuries or had some other kind of mishap. For example, the actors ended up wearing the Deadeye contact lenses for much longer than they were supposed to, and it took a huge toll on the health of their eyes. There were a lot of things like nails going through people's feet, Robert Tappert had a pretty bad mishap when he fell off of a rafter and caught his leg on a nail, which he then hung from by his skin. The cast and crew also had to sleep at the filming location at one point, and the cabin was so unpleasant to sleep in that Sam Raimi preferred to sleep in a cold, dark cemetery away from the filming site because he felt safer there than in the cabin. One frosty Tennessee morning, he woke up in the cabin next to some random hillbilly drinking moonshine next to him. Another famous story is how Bruce once ran into a local who he was heavily intimidated by, being afraid that he'd killed Sam Raimi and that Bruce would be next if he provoked him. Needless to say, it was a very unpleasant movie to shoot. From what I understand, Evil Dead 2 is a slightly less difficult movie to film. Except for the actors, of course. Everyone had their share of having to do gross things and having their characters get beat up and wear nasty makeup and stuff like that. Although Bruce Campbell and Ted Raimi definitely had it the roughest.
So Ted, how does it feel to be stuck in that costume all day?
It's inexplicable. It's beyond your wildest nightmares.
Bruce had to beat himself up and swim in gallons upon gallons of fake blood all day. And Ted had to play the role of Henrietta, which entailed both the Deadite makeup and a fat suit that built up a lot of heat. You can find behind the scenes footage of him taking it off, and sweat poured out of that costume like it was coming out of a faucet.
Incredibly grueling. At the end of the day, we would take off his latex feet and pour out the sweat that was probably an inch of
which was white because of the powder, because we have to powder his body down to get him into the suit and everything, so this white.
Army of Darkness had long filming days under the hot sun, which was made even worse by the costumes the actors all had to wear medieval armor and such. And yeah, Bruce Campbell still got beat up a lot, and he also spent many hours per day having the Evil Ash costume applied. Evil Dead 2013 was no walk in the park either. They really put Jane Levy through the ringer, and she took it like a champ. It's like Bruce Campbell always says, the harder it is to make, the easier it is to watch. Klaatu Barada Nikto is the sacred phrase that Ash couldn't remember in Army of Darkness, which ended up getting a lot of knights and peasants killed. It's an homage to The Day the Earth Stood Still, a 1951 science fiction classic. The phrase in that movie is a disarm code for the robot, Gort, in case its destruction gets out of hand. This phrase was also famously homaged in Return of the Jedi. There, two of Jabba the Hutt's goons were named Klaatu and Barada, and another goon had his whole species named the Nikto. The Army of Darkness Director's Cut is the alternate extended cut of Army of Darkness. It changes and extends certain scenes in the movie, most famously including the movie's original ending where Ash ingests too much of the sleep potion from the Wise Man. It was supposed to bring him back to his time, but instead, since he drank too much, he ends up in a post-apocalyptic future. The original cut is great, but if you haven't seen this cut, make sure you check it out. Within the Woods was the prototype for Evil Dead 1. It's 32 minutes long, shot on Super 8, and had a budget of only $1,600. It stars Bruce Campbell as Bruce, Scott Spiegel as Scotty, Ellen Sandweiss as Ellen, and some lady named Mary Valenti. They play two couples who go on vacation to a cabin in the woods, not knowing it was built on a cursed Indian burial ground, and they all get possessed and kill each other. It was made as a proof of concept to show to investors so they could get enough funding to make the real movie they wanted to make, which was The Evil Dead. Unfortunately, the only versions of Within the Woods available online are in very poor quality. Because of this, it's a pretty hard short film to watch, so it's not really worth watching for entertainment value, but it is worth watching for historical value if you're a big Evil Dead fan. Probably the most infamous and controversial scene in the entire franchise It depicts Cheryl Williams being assaulted and violated by the branches and vines of trees that have been possessed by the Kandarian demon. It's easily one of the most disturbing scenes in the movie, if not the most disturbing. In the years since the movie came out, Sam Raimi has even apologized for filming the scene in the first place due to how shocking and offensive it was. I wanted to include the clip of Sam Raimi discussing this, of course, but every article that discusses this topic links to a YouTube video that was uploaded by a channel that has since been deleted. So if I wanted to find this clip, I'd have to comb through every single Sam Raimi interview from the 80s up until 2006 when the video was uploaded. So if you can't trust my word, trust the word of all of these different news articles that all copy each other's homework. Seriously, this shit is so lazy. You can tell that they just read the previous article and just tried to make it different enough and hope that nobody would notice. One article claims that the interview was conducted by the San Diego Reader, and unless This Is My Boomstick is affiliated with the San Diego Reader, then that's just utter misinformation.
I hate the media!
After the credits finish rolling at the end of Evil Dead 2013, there's a brief scene of Bruce Campbell, cloaked in shadow, slowly revealing himself. As the music intensifies, he utters the legendary phrase, "Groovy," and then dramatically turns to the camera. This one post-credit scene got fans so excited for a future Evil Dead film, with Ash Williams finally returning, that it helped Bruce Campbell and Sam Raimi decide to actually bring back Ash with Ash vs. Evil Dead. Ted Raimi, who is Sam Raimi's younger brother and the Luigi to his Mario, has had many roles in the Evil Dead series. First, he was a false champ in Evil Dead 1. In Evil Dead 2, he had a significant role as Henrietta Nobi's Deadite. As previously discussed, this was a very physically taxing role for Ted to play, but in recent years he said that he enjoyed his time on the movie.
It's beyond your wildest nightmares.
He had a few bit parts in Army of Darkness.
Swallowed the juice, said the words, and here I am.
Did you say the words right this time?
I'll stand by you. You can count on my steel.
In Ash vs. Evil Dead, he reprised his role of Henrietta, and he also got to play his own new character, Chet Kaminsky, who was Ash Williams' friend from his youth and an even bigger degenerate than Ash.
Pink Fuck is a proprietary mix of liqueurs and spirits garnished with orange rind and nutmeg. Oh, and there's a shit ton of ketamine in it.
Building off the last entry, nepotism is a large part of any Sam Raimi production. Many friends and family members of the cast or crew have been brought in to contribute something to the movie, usually appearing as an extra or a fake chimp. The Evil Dead series has a history of changing titles mid-production. The original working title for The Evil Dead was The Book of the Dead. However, distributors didn't like that title because they thought it wouldn't sell as many tickets. Per distributors' request, they changed the title of the movie to The Evil Dead. Evil Dead 2 released in 1987 as Evil Dead 2: Dead by Dawn. But in the years since the movie's release, many re-releases of the movie on home media or on streaming services has opted to ignore the subtitle. So sometimes the movie is referred to as Evil Dead 2: Dead by Dawn, but most of the time it's just Evil Dead 2. The third installment was originally conceptualized as Evil Dead 3, but the production company wanted it to reach a wider audience, so they scrubbed the Evil Dead association from the title. Sam Raimi also wanted to call it The Medieval Dead, which would have been an awesome name, but eventually, as you probably guessed, they settled on the title Army of Darkness. Could have been worse.
Hi, I'm Sam Raimi, the director of The Evil Dead. I've invited Jonathan Ross to see my new movie, Evil Dead 2.
Oh, I don't believe this.
Say, you think this will scare the audience as much as the first one?
Yeah, that's a safe bet, Sam. It's got a lot more surprises.
Oh yeah, it's got a lot in it to grab the audience.
There's only one movie scarier than The Evil Dead. Evil Dead 2. Kiss your nerves goodbye.
Marvel Zombies was a comic book miniseries published by Marvel Comics from late 2005 to 2006, written by Robert Kirkman of Invincible and The Walking Dead fame. It was set in a universe where the Earth was brought to its knees by the Hunger Virus, a pathogen which, upon infection, caused the victim's flesh to decay, gave them an insatiable appetite for human flesh, but still let them retain their memories, personalities, skills, and superpowers. Almost every character in the Marvel Universe fell victim to the virus, hero and villain alike. Only a few human characters were still left alive. This run was followed up in 2007 by Marvel Zombies vs. the Army of Darkness, written by John Layman. In this comic, Ash ends up in the Marvel Zombies universe at the very beginning of the zombie plague. He meets many characters like Spider-Man, the Punisher, Scarlet Witch, and Doctor Doom. He initially plans to try and help end the zombie apocalypse before it starts, but when he finally finds the Marvel Universe's own Necronomicon, it tells him that the zombies have nothing to do with Deadites and are cosmic in origin, so there's nothing Ash can do with the Necronomicon to help. A nearly zombified Doctor Doom lets Ash use a portal to escape to another dimension, and after a few tries he settles on one that looks close enough like a normal New York City at first glance. But then he discovers that in this universe, every Marvel character has been turned into a werewolf, and then the story ends. Another notable detail in this story is that the Marvel Zombies universe had its own Ash Williams, so there's a chance that Ash exists in every Marvel universe. Evil Dead has had a massive influence on the gaming industry. Early first-person shooters were heavily inspired by Evil Dead 2 and Army of Darkness. id Software famously included the chainsaw in a Doom and the super shotgun in a Doom 2 because they were directly inspired by Evil Dead 2. There were also two famous instances of popular shooters made on the build engine from that time, having at least 40% of their voice lines just being Evil Dead quotes. First Duke Nukem 3D in 1996, and then Blood from 1997.
I live again.
More recently, Evil Dead was a huge inspiration to Capcom during the development of Resident Evil 7, citing its rural setting and use of small yet memorable cast of characters throughout the game's runtime. Notably when Ethan Winters gets his hands cut off with a chainsaw, and one of the boss fights against Jack Baker, where halfway through, Jack trades his axe for a jury-rigged chainsaw scissor contraption, upon which grabbing said weapon, he happily remarks, "Groovy!" This one is personal for me. NetherRealm Studios, the current team behind Mortal Kombat, has wanted to have Ash Williams in Mortal Kombat since MK9. He was planned to be a guest fighter in Mortal Kombat 11, the most recent title, but unfortunately that never panned out. It all started with a data mine of the Nintendo Switch port, which leaked almost every single DLC character that would be added to the game. One of the characters listed, as you could probably guess, was Ash. There was hype, sure, but the real hype wouldn't come until he was officially announced. There was a wrench though. Bruce Campbell had made a tweet saying, "Ash from Evil Dead will not be in Mortal Kombat." However, most people agreed that NetherRealm Studios probably just hadn't approached him yet to record dialogue, or maybe he was just trolling, and he was going to be in the game, but he was technically talking about Ash from Evil Dead and not Ash from Army of Darkness or something. Later, MK11's first DLC character, Shang Tsung, had a reveal trailer that also teased 3 other characters from the first Combat Pack, which were Nightwolf, Sindel, and Spawn. The remaining 2 characters in the pack would be revealed during the proper reveal trailer for the first Combat Pack. This was coupled with the distinct noise of a chainsaw, which confirms to everyone that Ash was one of the secret characters. To add fuel to the fire, Bruce Campbell then retweeted this trailer on Twitter saying, "Boy, this game sure looks swell, I should check it out." The reveal trailer finally came. Shang Tsung, Nightwolf, Sindel, Spawn, the Terminator, and the Joker.
That's it?
Myself and other Evil Dead and Mortal Kombat fans were confused. Why would they tease us with a chainsaw noise when Ash wasn't even there? everyone's attention turned towards the Joker. He was very clearly a late addition to this trailer. His character model was very clearly unfinished, and the editing for his section of the trailer didn't feel as natural as the rest of the characters. This led everyone to believing that Ash had been taken out of the trailer and replaced with the Joker at the last minute. There's screenshots floating around of early in-game promotions for the Combat Pack trailer that said Ash Williams instead of the Joker, but in hindsight, I'm not sure how valid those were. Those might have been fake, but nobody knows. So the trailer had dropped and Ash wasn't in it. Nobody knows why, but all we could do is wait for the next Combat Pack. When the final character of Combat Pack 1, Spawn, released, an official online newsletter was sent out to subscribers to promote him. Near the bottom of this email was a brief bit of legal text, which read Ash character from Army of Darkness is licensed from Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer Studios Incorporated. There it was. The smoking gun. The evidence that proved, beyond all shadow of doubt, that NetherRealm had intended to add Ash to Mortal Kombat. This assured me and other Ash advocates that he was coming, so we happily awaited the next DLC, being sure that he would be in this one. A few months later, the Aftermath expansion is released, including a few new story chapters and 3 new characters. Fujin, the God of Wind, Shiva, Queen of the Shokan, and last but not least, RoboCop. Don't get me wrong, I love RoboCop. It's one of my favorite movies ever, and I love the character, but I was not thrilled to see him as part of this DLC instead of Ash. He wasn't even in the original Switch data mine. Fujin and Shiva were the last 2 characters on the Switch data mine besides Ash who hadn't been added, which means they licensed and developed RoboCop while the game was on shelves. This was not a good sign. If they made a new guest character instead of just having the one they were already working on, that had to have meant that there was some kind of trouble getting Ash. Something that probably was out of NetherRealm's hands. The day Ash's fate in Mortal Kombat was probably sealed was at a drive-in screening of Evil Dead 1 and 2, hosted by Bruce Campbell himself. Before the feature began, Bruce took some questions from the audience while the sun went down. One person asked him what the deal was with Ash in Mortal Kombat.
Mortal Kombat 11, the jury's still out. Because look, the truth is very simple. Characters are kind of owned by companies, including Ash. So sometimes those companies aren't allowed to loan characters between franchises because other companies go, whoa! Then you have to make a deal. But it gets weird sometimes, so it might not happen only because of legal crap.
At the time, I took this as a good sign, thinking at least they're still talking about it, right? If they can sort it out, I'm sure he'll be in the next DLC. How wrong I was. In 2020, Mortal Kombat co-creator Ed Boon began teasing the next DLC pack. He had a reputation of trolling and dropping subtle hints on social media to build up hype for upcoming announcements. So much so that even on entirely random and benign tweets that don't mean anything, people will think it's a tease and try to connect it to some new announcement. But this time, he was completely upfront that his next tweets would be hints to what was coming next. The first of these hints was the song Bohemian Rhapsody by Queen. It would take a smarter man than me to connect that to Ash. The second hint, though, that's where it got interesting. The second hint was a link to the trailer for the first Nightmare on Elm Street movie. We knew it wasn't Freddy Krueger as a new character since Ed said as much, and he was already in MK9. How did I interpret this hint? Well, as you might know, there's a scene in that movie where the main character, Nancy Thompson, falls asleep while watching Evil Dead on TV. There it was, this was it. This had to be it. It's finally the hint, the proof that Ash was coming. It was cause for celebration. And then 5 minutes later, Ed Boon said, nope, not Ash, lol. So yeah, that sucked. None of the other hints had any possible connections to Ash either. And Combat Pack 2 ended up being Rain, a Hydromancer, Melina, a mutant assassin, and John Rambo as a guest character, voiced by Sylvester Stallone. There was speculation for a while after that maybe Ash would be in the next pack if there was one, but in June of 2021, NetherRealm Studios officially announced that there would be no more DLC for Mortal Kombat 11. Ash never came. It was a wild ride for all involved, and I'm still sad about it to this day. But at least Ash has his own game, so even if he was never in Mortal Kombat, I can still play as him on a modern console. But even if we hadn't gotten Evil Dead the game, there's still some other Evil Dead games we could have fallen back on. Evil Dead: Hail to the King was a 2001 survival horror game developed by Heavy Iron Studios for PlayStation 1 and Dreamcast. In this game, you play as Ash returning to the Nobi cabin and having to fight off evil once again. It's pretty similar to classic Resident Evil with fixed camera angles, tank controls, and limited inventory space, as well as very clunky combat. But unlike proper Resident Evil, where you could generally avoid most combat encounters if you didn't want to fight, Hail to the King offers no way to avoid most combat encounters. I'd say age hasn't been kind to this game, but that would imply that it was up to par in the first place. I wish I could say that this game was a forgotten hidden gem among survival horror or licensed games, but it just isn't. A couple of years later, we got Evil Dead: A Fistful of Boomstick, developed by Vic Entertainment, and released in 2003 for the PlayStation 2 and original Xbox. Fistful of Boomstick was an action hack-and-slash game which followed Ash trying to stop yet another Deadite outbreak that has occurred in the town of Dearborn, Michigan. His adventure sends him across time to the Civil War, the early colonial period, and in the game's final cutscene, feudal Japan.
Groovy.
The final entry in this trilogy, despite not actually being connected to the previous two, is Evil Dead: Regeneration. Developed by Cranky Pants Studios, and released in 2006 for the PlayStation 2, Xbox, and PC. Regeneration follows an alternate series of events from the movies, where at the end of Evil Dead 2, instead of being sucked through the portal to the Middle Ages, Ash remains in the present and is put inside an asylum due to all of the deaths on the Nobi cabin and nobody believing his demonic gobbledygook. The Necronomicon is found and is used by the evil Dr. Reinhardt, and another Deadite outbreak occurs, leading to Ash's escape, where he then embarks on another adventure to reclaim the Necronomicon and put a stop to evil once and for all. Joining Ash in his quest is Sam, a half-human, half-Deadite midget little person who is immortal and will always regenerate after death. He's also voiced by Ted Raimi.
Alright, we go. But if you get all deadite on me, even for a second, I'll carve you up like a Christmas goose. You got that, Stubby?
Reality check! Who you calling Stubby? Stubby?
Despite having pretty fun combat mechanics, the game is hindered by its low enemy variety, short runtime, and abrupt ending, where Ash and everybody else just get sucked into a portal. Yeah, that's it, they just get sucked into a portal. This wouldn't have been so bad if there was a sequel to the game, but I'll give you 3 guesses to if it actually got a sequel. Still, it's worth checking out. Freddy vs. Jason vs. Ash was a comic book miniseries published in 2008 by Wildstorm Comics and Dynamite Entertainment. It's a follow-up to the events of the movie Freddy vs. Jason, and it has Freddy Krueger possessing Jason Voorhees' mind and mentally dominating him, commanding him to go claim the Necronomicon so Freddy can bring himself back from the dead and turn the world into his own personal kingdom and hellscape. Ash, of course, has to stop them. It ends with Ash banishing Freddy to hell, and Jason Voorhees and the Necronomicon sinking to the bottom of Crystal Lake. The story outline for this comic was based on the actual movie they wanted to make to follow up Freddy vs. Jason, but New Line Cinema couldn't work out a deal with Sam Raimi and Bruce Campbell, because Sam and Bruce knew that Ash would win, but New Line didn't want Freddy to lose 2 movies in a row, despite him being killed and resurrected in literally every one of his sequels, so that movie was never made. Would have been a great movie, but what can you do? If you visit the filming location of The Evil Dead nowadays, all you'll find are some woods and a few mere remnants of what once stood, as the cabin the movie was filmed at burned to the ground not long after they had finished filming. There are many rumors about how it happened. Some claim it was struck by lightning. Some claim that Raimi himself believed it was haunted and burnt it down himself. The most popular theory for a while was that just random teenagers camped out there illegally and then accidentally burned it down. I think the official story of how it burned down now is that the property owner burned it down himself, as lots of film fans came to visit the filming location, but In that area, there were a lot of old bear traps that had been placed decades prior, and they just didn't want people stepping in them. Evil Dead, the Musical, is a Canadian rock opera adaptation of Evil Dead 1 and 2. It was created by a group of Canadian college graduates, Christopher Bond and George Reinblatt, who, with the help of Bruce Campbell himself, got permission from the right people to acquire the rights to write and perform the Evil Dead stage adaptation. Since its debut in 2003, it's garnered a massive cult fan base and has become one of the most successful off-Broadway stage plays of all time. If you're interested in the history behind the production, I recommend checking out the video made by the channel Wait in the Wings, which I'll be sure to link in the description. Evil Dead 2013 has an alternate ending following Mia after her ordeal at the cabin. She's limping along the road and then collapses, and is then found by an old man in a truck who rescues her and takes her to the hospital. This final shot of this ending is a close-up of her face with her eyes opening with a jump scare noise. At first, it looks like it's trying to imply she's been possessed again, but her eyes are their normal color instead of dead-eyed yellow, so I guess it was just trying to hint at her return sometime in the future. Which still has yet to happen, almost 10 years later. Maybe someday. Also, the term alternate ending is kind of misapplied here, because this is just an addition to the ending instead of an actual alternate ending. One interesting detail of horror genre history is Sam Raimi's back and forth with another legendary horror filmmaker, Wes Craven. They would each make small Easter eggs of each other's movies. Starting in Evil Dead 1, where you could see a grimy old Hills Have Eyes poster appearing in the cellar. Wes Craven later retaliated by having Nancy Thompson fall asleep while watching Evil Dead and A Nightmare on Elm Street. Raimi fired back by having Freddy Krueger's glove hanging in the work shed in Evil Dead 2. Years later in Scream, Wes Craven made another small jab at Raimi by having all the characters decide they would rather watch Halloween instead of The Evil Dead.
How many Hellraisers?
Right here. Fog, Terror Train, Prom Night. How come Jamie Lee Curtis is in all of these movies?
She's the
After Wes Craven sadly passed away in 2015, Sam Raimi made one last tribute to him in Ash vs. Evil Dead Season 2, Episode 9. In that episode, Ash travels back to the year 1982, and in the background, you can see a movie theater displaying a poster for The Hills Have Eyes, in perfect, framed condition, unlike the grimy one from Evil Dead 1. A lot of people associate these actions with some kind of rivalry between the two, but in reality, they just respected each other as titans of the genre, and they like to poke fun at each other. They were also both in John Carpenter's Body Bags. Wes Craven played a creepy guy Red Herring.
Pack of Coronados.
$2.75.
And Sam Raimi was a gas station attendant who got murdered. At the end of Evil Dead 2, the knight that declares Ash as the chosen one to lead their army and defeat the Deadites is none other than Sam Raimi himself. Seems obvious, but I never realized this until they pointed it out in the official Evil Dead 2 commentary track. I couldn't believe I never noticed him before. It's also kind of funny because Sam Raimi doesn't really do a lot of acting roles, and usually when he does, his character gets violently killed.
Well, are we ready to take a look?
Yeah. Oh, that's perfect! Oh, God. Got anything smaller?
All you need is a chainsaw for an arm and a shotgun to be just like Bruce Campbell in Evil Dead. Hail to the king.
Hey, isn't that supposed to be a chainsaw?
You want a piece of this? Yeah, I didn't.
Rated M for mature.
Come on, you freak!
Help!
Come on,
Bruce
take it like a man.
Campbell's chasing me!
In Jason Goes to Hell, The Final Friday, which is the 9th film in the Friday the 13th series, after Jason is killed in an ambush by the FBI, his soul carries on, and he racks up his body count in this movie by possessing various different hosts to carry out his kills. During the movie, one of the characters visits Jason's shack where he finds a Necronomicon, the very same one from Evil Dead 2, implying that Jason is a Deadite instead of just a zombie or a revenant. The director, Adam Marcus, has stated that this was his exact intention, and to him, Evil Dead, Friday the 13th, and Nightmare on Elm Street all share one universe. While Jason having the Necronomicon at all and being a Deadite doesn't really make much sense given the continuity of either series, it's still a fun headcanon to have. During early production for Ash vs. Evil Dead, Sam Raimi and Bruce Campbell originally wanted Jane Levy to return as Mia so she could accompany Ash in his new adventures against evil. But in the end, they decided to keep Evil Dead 2013 as its own separate thing, and replace their character with Kelly. It was still possible that Ash and Mia could have shared the screen together up until Bruce Campbell retired from playing Ash in live action altogether. The late, great Kentaro Miura was one of Japan's most acclaimed manga authors for his series, Berserk, a dark fantasy manga following the main character, Guts, a warrior who endures some of the harshest challenges and tragedies in all of fiction, but still presses on. With his dark hair, his mechanical arm, and his incredible proficiency at fighting demonic monsters, it's pretty easy to draw a comparison between Guts and Ash Williams. Miura himself had the same thought because the day after he finished writing the first chapter of Berserk, he went and he saw Evil Dead 2 in theaters. He thought that he had accidentally created a character so similar to Ash that they'd probably try to sue him. Thankfully though, that never happened. Miura penned Berserk all by himself for decades, up until his recent passing away in 2021. May he rest in peace. Evil Dead has had a couple of obscure mobile games. The first we'll talk about is Army of Darkness Defense, a tower defense game for mobile phones developed by Backloop Studios, where you play as Ash and command the warriors of Castle Kandar in the battle against Evil Ash and his undead army. It was sadly discontinued and removed from app stores in 2018. The next game to cover is Evil Dead, the game. No, not that Evil Dead, the game. This game was a 2011 iOS game developed by Trigger Apps. It featured isometric twin-stick shooter gameplay and loosely followed the plot of Evil Dead 1, having you play as Ash fighting off Deadites with the axe, the chainsaw, and the boomstick across 30 different levels. The last mobile game we'll discuss today is Evil Dead: Endless Nightmare, which was an endless runner game developed by Boom Dash Digital based on Evil Dead 2013. It has you auto-running across the woods, fighting or avoiding hordes of Deadites, and trying to reach the furthest distance possible and collect blood droplets before you die. It was ported to VR as Evil Dead Virtual Nightmare. Both versions of the game seem to have been delisted as of 2019. Ash vs. Evil Dead Season 2 finale, despite being a fun way to cap off the season, still felt off. Ash, Kelly, and Ruby travel back to 1982 so they can change the timeline and prevent the events of the films from ever happening. That doesn't happen because stuff. I won't recap the entire episode, but it ends with Ash defeating and banishing Baal, the Necronomicon, and his demon offspring to Hell, with Ash, Kelly, and Pablo returning to the present as heroes of Elk Grove. I remember first watching this ending and thinking, well that was abrupt. And as it turns out, this ending to Season 2 was rushed out the door because the original draft was entirely different. The showrunner, Craig DeGregorio, had his plans for what he wanted for the show, and those didn't always align with what Robert Tappert wanted. Craig's vision for the finale went like this. Ash goes to the cabin, fights Henrietta again, and grabs the Necronomicon and escapes the cabin out of the back. Right as 1982 Ash arrives at the cabin. Since the Necronomicon is gone now, he never read from it, and the events of the movies never happened in this timeline. Pablo is brought back to life, and Ash takes him into town. He gives Ruby and Kelly the Necronomicon for them to go and destroy it, and then he sneaks off to the bar hoping to find his past dad there. Meanwhile, Kelly and Ruby are walking through the woods, where they meet 1982 Ruby, who's still evil. Evil Ruby kills her future self and chases after Kelly to try and get a hold of the Necronomicon. Back at Elk Grove, 1982 Brock Williams is nowhere to be found, and instead Ash meets a distraught young woman, whom he comforts and then proceeds to shag in the bathroom. Then it turns out that lady was Kelly's mom. Ash's pull-out game is non-existent, and then back at the forest, Kelly feels her very existence changing, and she drops the Necronomicon, revealing that she now appears alongside Ash on the page for telling the hero from the sky. History has been changed, and Kelly is now Ash's daughter. Evil Ruby starts doing a bunch of evil crap with the Necronomicon, so Ash and Pablo leave to go find Kelly. Evil Ruby has brought back Ball, and the two take Kelly away, setting up a very different Season 3 than the one we got. This finale was what De Gregorio had in mind throughout the season, so Kelly had a lot of setup throughout Season 2 that never really paid off the way they intended it to. The reason they had to change it was because Robert Tapert didn't like the idea of Ash and Kelly being father and daughter, so he blocked that idea from happening. Craig left the show after Season 2. However, Ash still ended up having a daughter in Season 3, and I imagine Evil Ruby's plan of corrupting El Jefe through his seed is also a carryover from the original draft. Bruce Campbell famously narrates the tutorials and all tie-in console video games to Sam Raimi Spider-Man movies. In the PS2 and Wii version of Spider-Man 3, he gives little comments when you buy upgrades, one of which being this.
Nice purchase. Not as cool as a chainsaw attached to your arm, of course, but I bet it'll come in handy.
I don't need to tell you who that's a reference to.
I'm going to die.
Poker Night 2 is a game by Telltale Studios, where the player participates in a poker tournament against Brock Sampson from Venture Brothers, Claptrap from Borderlands, Max, the second half of the Sam and Max duo, and none other than Ash from Army of Darkness, with Gladys from Portal serving as the dealer. This game marks one of the few times, if not the only time, that Ash has made an official appearance and was not played by Bruce Campbell. Instead, in this video game, Ash was voiced by Danny Weber, a man whose most notable acting credit outside of this game is in the movie Birdemic: Shock and Terror.
Shit, here they come!
During the game, if Ash's funds get low enough, he'll add Evil Ash's helmet to the pot. If you win this hand, you get the helmet and unlock it as a wearable hat for the Pyro in Team Fortress 2 called the Necronomicon. It'd be cool to get this hat, but Poker Night 2 has been delisted from Steam for some time now, and the price of a CD key for it is... well...
Oh my goodness!
Bruce Campbell's near-death experience refers to the filming of Evil Dead 2's Blood Geyser scene, where Bruce laid horizontally and gallons upon gallons of fake blood were poured onto him to imitate a geyser of blood gushing from the wall. Sam Raimi instructed Bruce to let the crew know if he felt like he was drowning underneath all that fake blood, but lo and behold, Bruce had no idea how he would give that signal, so he almost drowned.
Of course, the Tempo has front-wheel drive with rack and pinion steering to help deliver a more positive road feel and quick response. Power-assisted front disc brakes and rear drums are standard, as well as McPherson strut front suspension. Now, under the hood, a fast-burn 2.3-liter four-cylinder engine is standard, developing 90 horsepower. Now, coupled with a standard manual 4-speed transmission, Tempo has what it takes to come.
Work shed.
There's a battling 80-yard line in Evil Dead 2 when Ash is trying to get Linda's severed head off of his hand. He gets up, shouts at to signal that he's trying to get to the
work shed
so he can find something in there to get his hand freed.
Work shed.
Years later, on the set of John Carpenter's Escape from LA, Kurt Russell approached Bruce Campbell and repeated the line to him, saying that it was his son's favorite line in the movie.
Work shed.
The very first Evil Dead game was a top-down survival strategy game developed by Palace Software and released in 1984 for the Commodore 64, predating Evil Dead 2's release. In this game, you control Ash, trying to survive in the Nobi cabin, and the object is to keep all entrances to the cabin closed and to defend yourself for as long as possible against whatever ghouls find their way into the cabin. Combat relies on an energy system where you need energy to attack enemies, and if you run out, you lose. You regain energy by picking up weapons like shovels and axes and stuff. If you're a big fan of retro gaming, or if you've made it your life's mission to play every Evil Dead game ever made, then go ahead and check it out. Buried somewhere on the grounds of the Evil Dead's filming location lies a time capsule full of various knickknacks and keepsakes from the shoot. The contents are supposed to include a burnt-out Fresnel light bulb, a piece of gaffer's tape, which is a type of tape used in filmmaking designed to blend in with its background, a piece of a fake wooden beam that was also used for It's Murder, which was one of Sam Raimi's Super 8 productions, and most mysterious of all, the code that's used to unlock the visual meaning of the Evil Dead. It's never been found, but Bruce Campbell swore it exists in an interview with Fangoria Radio. The link to said interview, unfortunately, is 404'd, so I can't play it. Hopefully someday it's found so we can learn what the true meaning of the Evil Dead is. Maybe it was found years ago, and the person who found it simply never shared it with anyone, leaving its secrets to forever remain in the dark. Or perhaps it never existed at all, and this was just Bruce Campbell's way of wasting a bunch of nerds' time. And the real Evil Dead time capsule is the friendships we forged along the way. Early in Evil Dead 1, the gang drives across a bridge on their way to the Nobi cabin. Originally, you could see a hiker on the side of the road right before they crossed the bridge, played by Robert Tapper. However, recent re-releases of the movie on Blu-ray and streaming have mysteriously decided to George Lucas some shrubbery right in front of him, effectively removing Robert Tapper from the shot entirely. Nobody's entirely sure why this change was made, and you'd likely never even notice it if you weren't already looking for it. But once you know it's there, it's impossible to ignore. There is a movement to remove the shrubbery and restore Robert Tapper in future releases of the movie. It's known as #Release of the Tapper Cut. It's unlikely they'll ever restore Tapper to the film, and I highly doubt they'll even ever tell us why he was removed in the first place. In 2016, the mobile game Family Guy: The Quest for Stuff had a promotional crossover event with Saw, Leprechaun, and Ash vs. Evil Dead. Ash has his own quest line where he interacts with the cast of Family Guy.
Ash Williams, what were you doing here?
I saw on TV that James Woods Hotel is overrun with undead screwheads, so I'm here to help.
Oh, you can't start by saying you used to make a hedge maze in the back. I don't know what a maze runner is, but I want to try and be one. And when I get bored, I'll just walk through the walls, cause plants don't got feeling.
So there is an official Family Guy version of Ash Williams. Bet you weren't expecting that one. In the ending of Army of Darkness' director's cut, the cave where Ash spends his centuries-long slumber was filmed in the Bronson Cave, which is a naturally formed cave in Hollywood where many movies and TV shows have been filmed. Its most famous appearance on screen was as the Bat Cave in 1966's Batman TV show starring Adam West and Burt Ward as Batman and Robin. I am very fond of this trivia. I think it's really cool. In the late 2000s, there was a small production company that called itself Award Pictures, led by a man named Glenn McRae. And they tried to make their own follow-up to the Evil Dead trilogy titled Evil Dead 4: Consequences. Glenn thought that since the franchise had lied dormant for years and Sam never expressed any interest in reviving it, nobody would care if he did it himself. So he decided to make his own Evil Dead movie with blackjack and hookers. Well, maybe no hookers, maybe no blackjack, but he still wanted to do it. However, he was very wrong in his assumption that the rights holders wouldn't care, and Sam Raimi sued Award Pictures for copyright infringement, because, yeah, of course he would. The lawsuit had ended by 2012, 1 year before Raimi and his friends released their own Evil Dead revival. Award Pictures also wanted to do a sequel of John Carpenter's Big Trouble in Little China, but I'll give you 3 guesses as to how that one turned out. You might be wondering, where is Glenn McRae and his company now? To tell you the truth, I have no idea. Every time I look up his name, I get dozens of other Glenn McRaes who have nothing to do with him. It's sad, really. I don't know anything about McRae aside from this incident, but I can definitely tell he was, like me, a massive fan of the movies. It must have been devastating to have someone he admired sue him. And this isn't me defending him or saying that Sam Raimi was the bad guy, because he definitely wasn't. Raimi was entirely justified in wanting to protect his property. But only if McRae didn't try to just claim Evil Dead for himself. Only if he had instead used his passion for Evil Dead as inspiration for something new. He could have been really successful. He could have possibly even stood among modern horror genre leaders like James Wan or Mike Flanagan. Instead, he's a ghost without a face, only remembered as a footnote in Evil Dead history. During the filming of Evil Dead 2, there were a number of scenes that were filmed but cut, some of which have never seen the light of day since. These include a different take of the blood geyser scene with green and yellow blood instead of red, Deadite Ash eating a squirrel, Ash's face reverting back to normal after overcoming his possession, probably done with stop motion, an extended sequence of Ed's Deadite form where he still attacks Ash despite half of his head being chopped off, although some parts of this version have been found, a shot of Henrietta's eyes being possessed as her husband read from the Necronomicon on the tape, and 2 scenes of Linda's severed head, one where she extends a snake-like tongue into Ash's mouth, and another shot where she vomits black ooze all over Ash while her head was in the vice. Evil Dead, similarly to many other popular franchises, has a whole mess of alternate timelines to follow. While it's not as confusing as something like Halloween, which has rebooted like 3 times, there are still many possible branching paths from each movie. The main timeline of the series is Evil Dead 1, which leads into Evil Dead 2, then Army of Darkness, and finally Ash vs. Evil Dead. While full of plenty of holes and inconsistencies, it's still more or less a cohesive story to follow. Then there's secondary timelines, which consist of different ways to read the movie's continuities. While all 3 movies are supposed to be connected, you could still make an argument for them being self-contained, following 3 different Ashes in 3 different universes. In The Evil Dead, Ash arrives at the cabin with his 4 friends, who are all possessed and defeated by Ash destroying the Natron de Monto and causing their bodies to disintegrate. But the evil is not defeated, and the morning after Ash's ordeal, he's still possessed and killed. Evil Dead 2 Ash arrives at the cabin with only his girlfriend, never destroys the Necronomicon, and is hailed as a hero very soon after arriving in the Middle Ages. His story is never followed up, as Army of Darkness Ash is yet another multiversal variant, being mostly similar to the previous Ash, the main difference being what happens to him once he arrives in the past. 3 different movies, 3 different timelines, 3 different Ashes. And that's just looking at the movies themselves. There is an entire world of ancillary media that creates countless more timelines, which all follow even more different Ashes. There's Evil Dead 2 comics, there's the Army of Darkness comics, there's the video games, which all take Ash in wildly different places. Like the Dynamite Comics timeline, the Regeneration timeline, the timeline where we actually got Ash in Mortal Kombat, just name a few. My preferred interpretation of the canon is that almost everything is canon. With a fair amount of exceptions, almost every movie, comic, and crossover are all canon to each other. By the time Ash vs. Evil Dead starts, Ash has been very, very, very busy fighting evil in the past 30 years. Is this messy? Yes. Especially since there's a whole world of Evil Dead comics that I haven't got to read yet. But my rules are, if it doesn't directly contradict the main timeline, or if the contradiction is small enough to ignore, it can be canon.
Hello, my name is Sam Raimi. I'm the director of such movies as Evil Dead, Crime Wave, Mort sur la Grille, Evil Dead 2, and most recently, Darkman. Maybe you've heard about them. When I'm shooting a movie, I just don't have time to massage my scalp with hair lotions. It's not the type of conduct that one would assume on a major motion picture production. You just don't do that. This attitude is irresponsible. So if you're the witness to this scene...
Même quand je dirige un film, je trouve toujours le temps le matin pour ma lotion pétrolane. Je tiens trop à mes cheveux. Chaque matin, une bonne friction de lotion pétrolane, ça tonifie les cheveux. C'est à base de produits naturels. Alors, les cheveux à problème, les pellicules, c'est pas pour moi.
Right to the foundation against directors who don't do shit on their shoot.
As James Cameron, Sam Raimi, and Luc Besson of Le Grand Bleu subscribe to the Foundation Against Directors Who Don't Do Shit on Their Shoot, right now.
If the Darkman segment was short, here's a little more. Thank you for your attention.
This theory, created by the YouTuber Cordery Effects, proposes that at the end of Evil Dead 1, since it failed to kill Ash, the eel simply trapped Ash in a time loop because it knew he was destined to defeat it. This loop would make Ash repeat the incident at the Nobi cabin time after time, never remembering it but still wearing down upon him subconsciously, until it could either convert him, kill him, or drive him insane to the point he would no longer be a threat. Evil Dead 1 was the initial run, and Evil Dead 2 was when Ash finally broke through the loop. This theory is used to explain the inconsistencies between the first two films, as despite what Sam Raimi and Bruce Campbell say, splicing Evil Dead 1 and Evil Dead 2 together wouldn't make sense as one long movie due to just how much continuity has changed. A common theme throughout this video has been the discrepancies between the different entries in the Evil Dead series, and how they break the illusion of being one long story. This is a theory I just came up with, which proposes that Ash vs. Evil Dead is not actually a continuation of the Evil Dead trilogy of movies, but rather a sequel to Evil Dead the musical. Ash vs. Evil Dead follows the version of the canon that Raimi intended, with Evil Dead 2 truly beginning with Ash being flown through the woods and possessed. But that isn't a real movie. There is no single long movie that opens with Ash arriving in the Nobi cabin with Cheryl, Linda, Scotty, and Shelley, and ends with Annie Nobi helping Ash to open a rift to the Middle Ages. That version of the story has never existed as a single feature, at least not in film. Evil Dead the musical is the only version of the story that truly bridges the first two films together, with no credits or recaps interfering. Thus, you could definitely interpret Ash vs. Evil Dead as being a follow-up to that instead of the movies. Imagine, it's the late 1990s. You're invited over to your friend's house to spend the night on Friday afternoon. You go over, you eat pizza, you play N64, you drink a lot of soda. Remember those days? I don't, because I wasn't born yet. Anyway, eventually you guys decide you should start watching some scary movies on VHS. You settle on Army of Darkness because even though you've both watched it 100 times each, it's still a very fun movie to watch with friends. But you've never watched it at his house before. And as you're watching the movie, you notice it's different from how you remember it. Certain scenes were shot differently, some lines are spoken differently, the death scenes seem a lot gorier, and everybody just seems to be more angry with each other, less patient, even though they were already pretty hateful to each other in the original movie.
Into the pit with those bloodthirsty sons of Moors!
And that's all well and good, but it just bugs you because it's not the Army of Darkness you remember. Why is it so different? There are rumors that every VHS copy of Army of Darkness is equipped with advanced algorithms. And these algorithms determine the viewer's personality who watches the movie, and thus personalizes the experience for them. Do you want to know something strange? I don't remember adding this entry to the iceberg. Really, I created this iceberg a long time ago. I uploaded it to icebergcharts.com, and since then I've been working on this YouTube video. And I get to the final tier elated because I think I'm finally almost done with this project, but then I see this. I don't know how I hadn't noticed it yet. I don't remember ever adding this entry, and I don't even know if I'm the person who added it. And if I wasn't, who was? I was gonna delete it thinking it was just nonsense, but it intrigued me. What could it mean? The Ivan Raimi cut? Do not research? It just doesn't make sense. In case you don't know who Ivan Raimi is, he's Sam Raimi and Ted Raimi's older brother. By trade, he's a physician, but he still dabbles in screenwriting. But the Ivan Raimi cut implies he had way more creative control over this version of whatever movie it was. And if it's something as simple as that, why does it say do not research? This may be the stupidest, most reckless thing I've ever done, but I want to get to the bottom of this. I began my journey by going on Google and searching up the Ivan Raimi cut. I couldn't find anything conclusive, but I knew the rabbit hole had to go deeper. To make sure nobody could trace my steps, I had to go ghost. I opened up a private window and connected to NordVPN so nobody could track me. Because I had a feeling that somewhere out there was someone who didn't want me to get to the bottom of this. Eventually, after days of scouring the dark web, I found a website with a link that said watch the Ivan Raimi cut. I clicked it, expecting a download or a streaming link, but nothing happened after I clicked it. I did a quick scan, make sure there was no malware installed to my computer, and after the search came up clean, I figured maybe this website is just broken and hasn't been touched in years, and whatever secrets it might have contained once are now lost to time. So I gave up. That is, until yesterday, when I received a VHS tape on my doorstep. I don't know who left it there or when, but there's nothing to do but watch the tapes and see what secrets they hold. The tape played nothing but static, but the air in my room felt different somehow, like I was being pulled towards the television. It was subtle at first, but it gradually got stronger and stronger, until I had to struggle to just stay still on my bed and not be pulled onto the floor towards the TV. The gravity coming from the television intensified until I had to struggle to keep my grip on my bed and not be pulled in. But it wouldn't let me go, and eventually my grip gave out and I was sucked towards the television. When I came to, I was in the back of the Oldsmobile Delta. Sitting to my right was Ted Raimi, and sitting to my left was Bruce Campbell. And the passenger seat was Sam Raimi, and driving the car was Ivan Raimi. None of them spoke a word. We were driving through wilderness until we reached the Nobi cabin. I tried to ask them why we were here and what they were doing, but at some point they had vanished. I was the only person sitting in the car. With no other options, I exited the car and stepped towards the cabin. It occurred to me that this was a pretty terrible idea, so I turned around only to see that it was suddenly pitch black outside, and the Delta was nowhere to be found. As dangerous as the Nobi cabin was, my chances were no greater if I tried to venture through the wilderness on foot. So with no other options, I entered the Nobi cabin. The cabin appeared identical as it did in the films. On the surface, it appeared as nothing more than a small, cozy cabin you would find comfort in the middle of the wilderness. But the air was permeated by this feeling of evil and hatred and disgust at my presence. It freaked me out, so I tried to open the door and escape, but the door wouldn't budge. I turned around and see that the Raimi brothers and Bruce Campbell had returned. They were standing next to each other side by side, but they had pale skin, pitch black eyes, and they were crying blood. They each pointed at me and chanted in unison. I tried even harder to escape, to no avail. I realized that I was all alone in this hellscape and nobody was coming to my rescue. I could either surrender and allow my soul to be consumed, or I could stand my ground and fight. Evil Ted Raimi started approaching me. I grabbed a chair and I smashed it against his head as he charged me. I used one of the chair's legs to stab him in the eye, and he started disintegrating into a mess of blood and flesh. Then he dropped a shovel. I picked up the shovel right as Bruce Campbell jumped towards me, and was able to decapitate him cleanly with it. Evil Bruce Campbell's body disintegrated and dropped a chainsaw. I picked up the chainsaw and revved it up, I looked up and saw evil Ivan Raimi standing there with Sam nowhere in sight. And then I looked up. Evil Sam Raimi was on the ceiling and he dropped towards me, but he fell right on the blade of my chainsaw. His body disintegrated. From Evil Sam's detritus, I retrieved the Kandarian dagger. Now it was just me and Evil Ivan. I waited for him to charge at me as the others had, but he simply began to laugh at me. I hesitated and tried to charge him, but he raised his hand towards me and struck me with a bolt of lightning. I was blown away and bounced off of the wall. I looked up towards him, slowly approaching me, continuing his disgusting, evil cackling. I reached for the dagger and tried to throw it at him. I reached for the dagger and tried to throw it at him. He caught it by the blade, toyed with it for a bit, and tried to throw it back at me to finish me off. But in one single motion, I grabbed it midair by the handle, flipped it around to its throwing position, and launched it straight towards the throat of Evil Ivan.
It's all in the reflexes.
The leader of this wretched band of demons, who wear the faces of innocent men, cried out in agony and began to melt as his underlings had. A rift opened in the sky, tearing the cabin apart and pulling me up into it. I awoke on my bed in a pool of sweat, in front of a TV playing nothing but static. Had any of this actually happened, or was I simply sleep deprived from staying up all night and playing as Ash Williams in Fortnite? I guess I'll never know, but for now I'll consider the mystery of the Ivan Raimi cut solved.
It doesn't exist!
Studies show that animals, just like humans, prefer hit music. Note, although surrounded by deadly snakes, I'm protected by the all-new, all-hit 96 WHYT FM. HYT is the only station that plays all hits all the time. Now watch. Feelings. Please, don't try this with any other station. Karma, 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 karma.
96 WHYT. All new, all hits.
Very frightening, very scary. Don't be alarmed, because you see, it's only a picture.
I do really mean it, by the way. Thank you so much for watching if you've made it to the end. This video took me so agonizingly long for me to make, but now that it's all done, I'd say it was well worth it. Even if this video doesn't get more than like 100 views, if even one person watches it and enjoys it, having learned something new or at least found it entertaining, then my goal will have been met. I'll probably have a follow-up project soon, so in the meantime, I hope life treats you well. Take care.